Ancient secrets hidden in an abandoned house begin to reveal impossible connections, and each discovery challenges everything once believed to be true. Winter came early to Pine Grove, and the cobblestone streets reflected the diffuse glow of street lamps, while fog spread over the pine trees, giving the town an air of silence and introspection. Claire Adams was turning 28, but the date held little significance for her. Since the accident that left her in a wheelchair, birthdays were silent reminders, marked by untouched cakes and the absence of celebration. Sitting alone in the café she'd been frequenting for weeks, her eyes traced the fogged glass, following the dance of the fine rain that had begun to fall. The navy blue coat she wore seemed to reflect the melancholy that had accompanied her since the accident, while her fingers drummed on the arms of her chair, a habitual gesture to relieve her restlessness. Pine Café was her private refuge, a place where she could feel invisible among tourists and locals. The smell of cinnamon and hot chocolate mingled with the aroma of freshly baked cheese bread, creating a sense of comfort she rarely found elsewhere. She was sipping her cinnamon coffee when a child's voice surprised her. "Do you like drawing blue butterflies too?" Claire turned, confused. A girl of about 6 was watching her with curiosity, curly hair tied in colorful braids and a smile that revealed a missing front tooth. In her small hands, she held a colorful drawing of a house with a tower. "I don't draw butterflies," Claire responded, uncomfortable with the unexpected approach. "But you have one tattooed here." The girl pointed to Claire's wrist, where a small blue butterfly was tattooed under her coat sleeve, completely hidden at that moment. Claire felt a chill. She pulled her sleeve down, covering the tattoo she had gotten after the accident even more. A personal symbol of transformation that practically no one knew about. "Sophie, don't bother the lady," a man approached hurriedly, with a worried expression. He appeared to be around 35, dark hair disheveled by the wind and eyes that matched the green of the region's pine trees. "I'm sorry, she's very spontaneous." "It's no problem," Claire responded automatically, still intrigued by the girl's observation. "How did you know about my tattoo?" Sophie shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. "I saw it in a dream, just like Grandma Teresa's necklace that you wear hidden." Claire instinctively brought her hand to her neck, where, beneath her coat and blouse, was an old silver cameo that had belonged to her grandmother. No one besides her knew she wore it, much less an unknown child. The man seemed embarrassed. "Sophie has a very fertile imagination. I'm Luke Nelson, and this is my daughter, Sophie. We just moved to Pine Grove." "Claire Adams," she introduced herself mechanically, still absorbing the strange encounter. "You said Teresa. How did you know my grandmother's name?" Sophie smiled again, extending the drawing to Claire. "It's written here, see? Grandma Teresa's house with the tower where the secret room is." Claire took the drawing with trembling hands. The paper showed an old house, almost identical to her grandmother's house in the hills of Pine Grove, with details that only someone who knew the place could reproduce. The tower on the right side, windows with colored stained glass, even the red swing in the garden that her grandfather had built decades ago. "Do you know my family's house?" asked Claire, her voice oscillating between curiosity and distrust. Luke seemed as surprised as she was. "We've never been there. Sophie, where did you get this?" "From my dream," the girl answered simply. "The lady with white hair showed me." Claire's discomfort increased. Her grandmother, who had died 3 years ago, always had hair as white as the July snow in Pine Grove. The coincidence was too disturbing. "Sophie has these hunches sometimes," Luke explained, visibly uncomfortable. "Since we've been alone, this started happening. The doctors say it's a way of processing absence." Claire nodded, not knowing how to respond. There was something familiar about this man, as if she had seen him before, perhaps in an old photograph or in a dream forgotten upon waking. "The tower has a small door behind the bookcase," Sophie continued, now sitting unceremoniously at Claire's table. "That's where the secrets are kept." Luke sighed, pulling up a chair. "May I sit for a minute? I promise we won't bother you much. It's just that, well, Sophie seems determined to talk to you." Claire hesitated, but agreed with a gesture. For some inexplicable reason, she felt simultaneously attracted to and apprehensive about this conversation. "You moved to Pine Grove recently?" she asked, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. 2 weeks ago, Luke answered. "I'm an architect. I got a restoration project in the historic center. It was an opportunity to start over after. He looked at Sophie, who was now drawing on another paper with colored crayons. After losing my wife. I'm sorry, Claire murmured, recognizing in Luke's gaze the same pain she saw in her own reflection since the accident. It was 3 years ago, he continued. Since then, it's been just the two of us. And you? Are you from here? Not exactly. I grew up between Portland and here. My grandmother lived in Pine Grove. We spent every winter in her house. After the accident, I decided to move permanently. The accident, Luke began, but interrupted himself, as if afraid of being invasive. Car accident, 5 years ago, Claire completed dryly. Since then, I've had a new perspective on life. Literally lower. The self-ironic comment surprised Claire herself. She rarely talked about her condition, especially with strangers. Sophie looked up from her drawing. You'll walk again when you find all the keys. The silence that followed was as dense as the fog outside. Luke opened his mouth to reprimand his daughter, but Claire stopped him with a gesture. What keys, Sophie? The ones Grandma Teresa hid for you. One is in the hem of the blue flowered dress, the girl answered, concentrating again on her drawing. That's the first one. Then there are 6 more. Claire felt her heart accelerate. The blue flowered dress was her grandmother's favorite, carefully stored in a chest in the attic of the house. How could that child know? I think we've bothered you enough, Luke said, standing up. Sophie, let's go. Miss Adams probably has appointments. Actually, Claire surprised herself again with her own words, I'd like to understand better what your daughter is saying. Daddy, show her the photo, Sophie asked, pulling on the sleeve of Luke's coat. What photo, Sophie? The one you found in Grandpa's book, with the lady who looks like Aunt Claire. Luke furrowed his brow. Sophie, we don't have any photo like that. He turned to Claire, embarrassed. Sorry, sometimes she mixes reality and imagination. It's in your pocket now, Sophie insisted. As if moved by an involuntary force, Luke brought his hand to the inside pocket of his coat, and his face paled as he pulled out an old and slightly yellowed photograph that Claire had never seen before. I had forgotten it was with me, he murmured, confused. I found it yesterday among my father's things. I didn't even look at it properly. Claire extended her hand, and Luke, hesitantly, gave her the photograph. The shock left her momentarily speechless. In the image, faded by time, a young woman smiled, sitting on a garden bench. The face was unmistakable, Ellie, Claire's mother, and by her side a child of approximately 4 years old smiled shyly at the camera. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. This is my mother, Claire whispered, touching the smiling face in the photograph. But this child, who is it? Luke examined the photo carefully. I don't know. I found it among my father's old documents. Actually, I hadn't really noticed it. Claire turned the photograph over, looking for some inscription. On the back, in her mother's unmistakable handwriting, there was only a date. Winter of 1992 and the initials E and R. You need to go to the Tower House, Sophie interrupted, pushing another drawing toward Claire. Grandma Teresa is waiting. Claire exchanged a confused look with Luke. Her grandmother had passed away 3 years ago. Before she could explain this to the girl, Luke checked his watch. We really need to go. Sophie has ballet class in half an hour. He took a card from his pocket and handed it to Claire. My number. If you want to talk more about all this. Claire accepted the card, placing it in her purse along with Sophie's drawings. Thank you. Perhaps we can meet again. Tomorrow, Sophie stated with conviction. You'll go to the house today and find the key. Tomorrow we'll help you with the rest. After they left, Claire remained motionless, contemplating the photograph. The disturbing encounter swirled in her mind as she tried to find rational explanations. How could that child know such specific details about her life? Hours later, Claire stopped her adapted van in front of her grandmother's house. Since the accident, she rarely came here. The property, situated in the hills away from Pine Grove, remained under the care of Judith, the housekeeper who had faithfully served her family for decades. Miss Claire, what a nice surprise, exclaimed the lady as she opened the door. Her grey hair was tied in a simple bun, and her wrinkled face lit up with a genuine smile. It's been so long since you've appeared. Hello, Judith. Sorry for not letting you know I was coming. Nonsense, this house is still yours. Your grandmother always said you would return when the time was right. Claire raised her eyebrows. The right time? Judith averted her gaze, suddenly interested in straightening a cushion. A figure of speech. Would you like some tea? I just made cheese bread. The house maintained the same smell from her childhood, a mixture of lavender, old wood, and the constant aroma of some delicacy coming out of the oven. Claire maneuvered her chair down the main hallway, observing the pictures on the walls. Generations of the Addams family looking solemnly from their golden frames. The house is exactly as she left it, commented Claire, entering the spacious living room with its Persian rug and dark wooden furniture. Ms. Teresa left very clear instructions. Nothing was to be changed until... Judith interrupted herself again. Until what, Judith? The housekeeper smiled enigmatically. I'll get your tea. While waiting, Claire looked at the tower visible through the side window, exactly as in Sophie's drawing. A shiver ran down her spine. Determined, she headed to her grandmother's old room, now transformed into a kind of memorial, with her clothes still hanging in the wardrobe and her personal objects untouched on the dressing table. Claire opened the large cedar chest at the foot of the bed. The familiar smell of mothballs and old perfume brought tears to her eyes. Among the carefully folded fabrics, she found what she was looking for, the blue flowered dress that her grandmother wore on special occasions. With trembling fingers, she examined the dress, feeling every inch of the fabric. In the hem, she noticed a part of the lining that seemed denser. Using a small scissors from the nearby sewing box, she carefully opened a few stitches, and her heart raced when her fingers touched something metallic. An old key of darkened bronze fell into her lap. Not possible, she murmured to herself. Found what you were looking for? Claire startled. Judith was standing at the door, holding a tray with tea and cheese bread, her gaze fixed on the key. Judith, did you know about this? The housekeeper placed the tray on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed. Your grandmother told me that one day you would come looking for answers. She said it would be when you were ready. Ready for what? And how did a child I've never seen before know about this key? Judith nervously adjusted her apron. Some say children can see what we adults have forgotten how to see. That doesn't answer my question. That key opens the secret compartment in the tower library, Judith finally explained. Your grandmother kept her most precious memories there, and also the most painful ones. Claire clutched the key in her palm. Take me there. The library in the tower was a circular room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a sliding ladder to reach the highest volumes. The smell of old paper and leather mingled with that of the waxed wooden floor. I always wondered why Grandma kept this room locked, commented Claire, observing the environment she had rarely visited in childhood. Not everything we keep should be seen by everyone, replied Judith, heading to one of the shelves. The compartment is behind these books. Claire approached, as Judith removed several volumes from a shelf at eye level, revealing a small wooden panel with an ornate lock. With her heart racing, Claire inserted the key. The mechanism turned with a soft click, and the panel slid to the side, revealing a space the size of a shoebox. Inside was a red leather-bound diary, several letters yellowed by time, old photographs, and a small fabric-wrapped package. Claire took out the diary first. On the first page, she recognized her grandmother's elegant handwriting. For Claire, when the time comes to know the truth. I'll leave you alone, murmured Judith, discreetly withdrawing. With trembling hands, Claire began to leaf through the diary. The first pages contained Teresa's everyday memories, but she soon realized that several sheets had been torn out, creating gaps in the narrative. Among the remaining pages, she found cryptic notes. E can't know yet. It would be dangerous for all of us. J insists we keep the agreement. The money guarantees our silence, but for how long? The child deserves to know their true origin, but the Nelsons would never allow it. Claire felt a chill upon reading Luke's surname. What connection existed between the Addams and Nelson families? She continued reading, finding more enigmas than answers. 1992. The secret meeting with Ellie went well. The girl has grown so much. Elle still asks about her, but what can we say to a 4-year-old child? Ellie was her mother. And Elle? Could it be possible that... Claire set the diary aside and picked up the package of photographs. The first image showed her mother, very young, holding a baby in her arms. On the back, the annotation, Ellie and Claire, 1998. The date confused her. Claire was born in 1997, not 1998. Was it an error? She continued examining the photos until she found one that made her blood freeze. Her mother pregnant, next to a man who was not her father. The man had the same green eyes that Claire had noticed in Luke Nelson. At that moment, her phone rang, startling her. It was an unknown number. Hello? Claire? Luke's voice sounded from the other end. Sorry to call like this, but Sophie is insisting. She said you found the key and need help with the diary. Claire held the phone tightly. How could she know? I have no idea. She woke up from her nap agitated, saying she needed to talk to you. Something about torn pages and a hidden ring. Claire looked at the small fabric-wrapped package she hadn't yet opened. With trembling fingers, she undid the knot, revealing a gold ring with a small ruby. Inside the band, an inscription, RN and EA. Forever. Luke, Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. I think we need to talk. There are things here that don't make sense. I'm on my way, he replied. Sophie's already in the car, insisting she knows where you are. It's scary, to be honest. While waiting, Claire continued examining the contents of the compartment. Among the letters, she found official documents with the Pine Grove City Hall letterhead. One caught her attention, a birth certificate in the name of Elizabeth Nelson, dated 1970, the same year her mother, Ellie Adams, was born. My God, murmured Claire, the pieces starting to fit together. Who was my mother, really? The sound of a car parking interrupted her thoughts. Minutes later, she heard Sophie's animated voice echoing through the house, followed by hurried steps climbing the tower stairs. Claire, Luke called, knocking softly on the open library door. Sorry for the invasion, but I found Grandma Teresa's things, Sophie exclaimed, running to Claire with open arms, as if they were old friends. Now we can start putting the puzzle together. Luke entered hesitantly, his gaze alternating between Claire and the scattered documents. What's happening here? Claire held up the photograph of her mother with the unknown man. Luke, do you recognize this man? He approached, taking the photo carefully, his face visibly paled. It's my father, he answered with a hoarse voice. Richard Nelson. A dense silence filled the library. Time seemed suspended as Claire and Luke processed the revelation that had just materialized between them. Richard Nelson, Claire repeated slowly. Your father knew my mother. Luke leaned on the table, visibly shaken. That doesn't make sense. My father never mentioned any Ellie or any connection to the Adams family. The initials on the ring, Claire showed the jewel she had found. RN and EA, Richard Nelson and Ellie Adams, or Elizabeth Nelson, according to this certificate. Luke examined the documents with incredulity. Are you suggesting that your mother was a Nelson? That our families are connected somehow? I know where the torn pages are, Sophie calmly interrupted, sitting on the floor leafing through random books. Grandma Teresa hid them in the place where the sun and moon meet. Claire and Luke turned their attention to the girl. Sophie, how do you know these things? Claire asked gently. The child shrugged as if the answer were obvious. The white-haired lady tells me in dreams. She says I'm the messenger. Luke knelt beside his daughter. What lady, Sophie? Have you ever seen her awake? No, silly. She's not here anymore. She's in the place of stars, but she can see everything. Claire felt a shiver. The description sounded exactly like something her grandmother would say. Teresa always talked about the stars as a place where people went to rest after their time on Earth. The sun and moon meet, Claire murmured thoughtfully. Grandma had a stained glass window with that theme. In her room, Sophie exclaimed, rising excitedly. Let's go. Judith watched them from the door when they returned to the main bedroom. Her concerned gaze followed Sophie, who ran directly to the eastern window of the room, decorated with a beautiful stained glass that depicted the sun and moon in a mystical embrace. Judith, do you know if my grandmother hid things near this stained glass? Asked Claire. The housekeeper hesitated. Miss Teresa had many hiding places. She said the truth needed to be protected until the right moment. And that moment would be when the messenger arrived, replied Judith, staring fixedly at Sophie, who was now carefully examining the base of the window. Here, exclaimed the girl, pressing a small ornament in the wooden frame. To everyone's surprise, a secret compartment opened in the adjacent wall, revealing a package wrapped in blue silk fabric. Luke looked at Claire. This is unbelievable, she completed, approaching to take the package that Sophie was already extending in her direction. Carefully, Claire unwrapped the fabric, revealing the torn pages from the diary, carefully preserved, along with more photographs and a sealed envelope with her name written in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "I'll leave you to it," said Judith, withdrawing. "I'll call when dinner is ready. I imagine you'll be spending the night here." Claire didn't respond, already absorbed in reading the pages. Luke sat nearby, while Sophie played quietly with an old doll she had found on the dresser. "My God," whispered Claire after a few minutes. "Luke, look at this." She passed him one of the pages dated 1970. "Today Elizabeth returned home, but not as we expected. George is furious. She is only 17 and already carries a life inside her. The Nelson boy was expelled from town by his own father when he learned of the pregnancy. We agreed that the baby will be registered as an Adams to avoid scandals. George demanded that the subject never be mentioned again. Poor Richard doesn't even know he'll be a father." Luke read the next page aloud. "The baby was born today, a beautiful girl that Elizabeth insists on calling Ellie, to keep something of the name her father chose for her. Elizabeth. My heart breaks seeing my daughter's suffering, forbidden from seeking the man she loves. The Nelsons are too powerful, and George fears the consequences if the truth comes out. The agreement between the families was sealed. The Adams will never reveal that Ellie is Richard's daughter, and the Nelsons will secretly finance the child's education." Claire felt tears running down her face. "My mother was Richard Nelson's daughter. That would mean my father would be your grandfather," Luke completed, equally shocked. "But that doesn't explain the photo of my mother with you as a child." Claire picked up another page. 1992. Richard and Ellie met secretly today. He has been married for years to Margaret and has a son named Luke. Ellie brought Claire to meet him, her own half-brother, though neither knows this. How it hurts to keep these secrets, but old Anthony Nelson still lives, and his hatred for the Adams hasn't diminished. If he discovers that his son had a daughter with an Adams, the consequences would be devastating for both families. "Half-siblings," repeated Luke incredulously. "My father and your mother were half-siblings, which makes us cousins," concluded Claire, trying to process the information. "Your grandmother and my great-grandfather were siblings. From what I understand here, there was a family feud decades ago. Something about land and a fortune unfairly divided." Luke ran his hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. "That explains why my father always avoided talking about my grandmother's family. He only said that some ties needed to be cut." Claire continued reading the pages, each revelation more surprising than the last. Apparently her mother Ellie and Richard Nelson maintained secret contact for years, supported by Teresa, who believed that the family bond should be preserved despite old disputes. "It says here that your father visited my mother regularly until 1998 when—" Claire stopped, feeling her blood freeze in her veins. "When what?" pressed Luke. "When she got pregnant again." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain that had begun to fall outside, softly hitting the windows of the old house. "According to this," Claire continued, her voice trembling slightly, "my mother had another child in 1998, a child of Richard Nelson's." "Impossible," Luke shook his head. "My father never... He loved my mother." "The letter," Sophie said suddenly, pointing to the sealed envelope that Claire had not yet opened. "The answer is in Grandma Teresa's letter." With trembling fingers, Claire opened the envelope, removing several sheets covered with her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "My dear Claire, if you are reading this letter, it means that the moment I both feared and awaited has arrived. The truth has finally found its way to you, probably through the hands of the child I called in my dreams. The messenger. There are secrets in our family that were buried deeply to protect everyone. Your mother, Ellie, was born Elizabeth Nelson, daughter of Richard and my daughter Antonia. Due to painful circumstances, she was raised as an Adams, on the condition that we would never reveal her true origin. Years later, Ellie reconnected with her biological father, Richard. What began as a family reunion transformed into something more complex. Richard was already married and had a son, Luke. The bond between them resurfaced, despite all the family and social impediments. In 1998, Ellie gave birth to her second child, the fruit of this forbidden relationship. The child was given to a trusted family to be raised away from the conflicts between the Adams and Nelsons. His baptismal name was Ryan. Claire, my dear, you have a brother you've never met, and this brother grew up without knowing his true origin. The accident that took your parents from you was not mere fatality. George discovered the truth about Ryan and confronted Richard. During that meeting, something terrible happened. George lost control of the car on his return, resulting in the accident that took Ellie and him. I kept these secrets to protect you, hoping that time would heal the wounds between our families, but the truth cannot remain hidden forever. Ryan was adopted by Martha and Carl Sanders. They moved to Florence and raised him as an only child. He must now be 27 years old. Claire, it's up to you to decide what to do with this information. Seek your brother or let the past rest. Whatever your choice, remember that love has always been stronger than the mistakes we made. With all my love, Grandma Teresa. Claire let the letter fall into her lap, silent tears streaming down her face. Luke remained motionless, absorbing the shocking revelations. I have a brother, Claire finally whispered. A brother I never knew. Sophie, who had remained surprisingly quiet, approached Claire and gently touched her face. Don't cry. The boy in the drawing is fine. He has dreams like me. What boy, Sophie? Asked Luke softly. The girl picked up her backpack and took out a colorful drawing that showed a young man with dark hair in front of a lighthouse. Miss Claire's brother. He lives near the sea and makes little wooden boats. Claire and Luke exchanged perplexed looks. How could you know that? Claire asked, her voice barely audible. Sophie smiled, that innocent child's smile that seemed to contain the wisdom of the universe. Grandma Teresa showed me. She said you needed to meet to fix what was broken a long time ago. At that moment, Judith knocked softly on the door. Dinner is served, and there's someone else who wants to see you. Confused, Claire and Luke followed the housekeeper to the living room. Standing by the fireplace, observing the photographs on the console, was a young man approximately 27 years old. When he turned, Claire felt her heart skip a beat. He had the same eyes as her. Hi, said the young man, visibly nervous. My name is Ryan Sanders. A lady named Teresa has been appearing in my dreams for months, saying I need to come to Pine Grove to find my real family. The silence that filled the room was almost palpable. Claire held firmly to the arms of her chair, her eyes fixed on the young man who had just introduced himself. Ryan Sanders, the name that Teresa had mentioned in her letter, the brother Claire never knew existed. How did you find us? Was the first question Luke managed to formulate. Ryan ran his hand through his dark hair, a nervous gesture that Claire noticed with a start was identical to her own. It's going to sound crazy, he began, but for the last few months I've been dreaming of an elderly lady with white hair. She showed me this house, talked about a sister in a wheelchair and about family secrets that needed to be revealed. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Teresa, she murmured. My grandmother, exactly. In the dreams, she said that name. Teresa Adams. At first I thought I was going crazy, but the dreams were so vivid, so real. Ryan hesitated. 2 weeks ago I received a letter in the mail. He removed an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. The paper was identical to what Claire had just read. The same discreet Adams family letterhead, the same elegant handwriting. The letter told me to come to Pine Grove today specifically, that I would find answers to questions I didn't even know I had. Ryan looked directly at Claire. It said I would find my sister. That's impossible, interrupted Judith, seeming genuinely perplexed. Ms. Teresa passed away 3 years ago. She couldn't have sent a letter recently. The date on the envelope, Ryan pointed out. It's from 5 years ago. Luke examined the envelope. He's right. It was posted 5 years ago, but only delivered 2 weeks ago. Teresa planned everything, Claire murmured, still trying to process the situation. Somehow she knew exactly when and how this would happen. Sophie, who was observing the scene with tranquil curiosity, approached Ryan and took his hand without ceremony. You make wooden boats? Ryan looked at the girl in surprise. How do you know that? Grandma Teresa told me. She said you built a whole collection of boats for your mom. Ryan's face paled. That's true. It's a hobby I started as a child. My mother, my adoptive mother, loved the collection. Claire felt tears in her eyes. The reality of the situation finally hit her with full force. This man was her brother. They shared the same blood, the same history, even though they had grown up separated and unaware of each other's existence. Ryan, she said softly, I think we need to talk. There's a lot you need to know. Judith discreetly cleared her throat. I'll serve dinner. You can talk at the table. The meal proceeded in a surreal atmosphere. Between plates of mushroom risotto and red wine from Teresa's cellar, Claire and Luke shared with Ryan the discoveries of the last few hours. The pages from the diary, the old photos, the letters revealing the true history of the Adams and Nelson families. Ryan listened to everything with a mixture of incredulity and fascination. Occasionally, he would ask questions or share fragments of his own life. How he grew up in Florence with the Sanders, his training in naval engineering, his current work restoring old boats. My parents, the Sanders, were always honest about my adoption, he explained as Judith served dessert, a traditional flan. They said my biological mother couldn't raise me, but that she had given me up with a lot of love. And they never mentioned names. Details about your origins? Asked Claire. Ryan shook his head. Only that I came from a family in Pine Grove and that the arrangement was made by a respected lady from the town. Now I understand it was Teresa. Grandma always protected everyone, Claire reflected, even when it meant hiding the truth. Sophie, who had remained surprisingly quiet during dinner, suddenly spoke. Now you need to go to the place of the sad trees. Everyone looked at the girl. What place is that, Sophie? Luke asked gently. Where the important papers are kept. Grandma Teresa said it's the last piece of the puzzle. Claire frowned, thoughtful. Sad trees. The willow. Grandpa George's office had a huge painting of willows. Judith, who was collecting the plates, nodded. Mr. George's office has remained locked since his passing. Miss Teresa never allowed it to be opened or modified. Do you have the key? Asked Claire. No, Miss Claire. Your grandmother said the key would be with you when the time was right. Claire closed her eyes, trying to think. Teresa always spoke in metaphors, in symbols. If she had prepared everything so far in advance, the key would be somewhere obvious, yet unexpected. The cameo, she murmured suddenly, bringing her hand to the necklace she wore under her blouse. I always thought it strange that the pendant was so heavy. With trembling fingers, Claire removed the necklace and examined the old silver cameo. After a few seconds of inspection, she discovered an almost imperceptible mechanism. The pendant opened, revealing a small golden key hidden inside. Ryan looked at Claire with admiration. Amazing! It's like we're in a mystery novel. Our life has become one, replied Claire with a sad smile. Let's go to the office. George Adams' office was on the ground floor, an imposing room with dark wood paneling and a large painting of willows that dominated the main wall. The key turned smoothly in the lock, as if it had been used recently, despite the years of abandonment. The air inside the room was surprisingly fresh, without the musty smell Claire had expected. Heavy curtains blocked most of the outside light, but Judith quickly lit the lamps, revealing an environment preserved in time. The work desk impeccably organized, books aligned on the shelves, even a partially consumed cigar in the crystal ashtray. It's as if he just left, murmured Luke, impressed with the state of preservation. Teresa kept this room clean and aired regularly, explained Judith. She said one day it would be important. Claire approached the painting of the willows. Something about it had always intrigued her, even as a child. The trees seemed almost alive, their branches hanging over a serene lake that reflected a cloudy sky. There's something behind that painting, Sophie declared with conviction, once again surprising everyone with her inexplicable perception. Luke helped remove the heavy frame from the wall, revealing a built-in safe. It needs a combination, observed Ryan, examining the mechanism. Claire thought for a moment. Sophie, did Grandma Teresa mention any number in your dreams? The girl shook her head negatively, then pointed to George's desk. It's in the music box. On the desk, almost hidden among books and papers, was a small carved music box. Claire recognized it immediately. It had been a gift from her to her grandfather on his last birthday. Upon opening the box, a soft melody filled the environment, Für Elise by Beethoven. On the inside lid, handwritten were the numbers 1707-70. July 17th, 1970, murmured Claire. My mother's date of birth. Ryan approached. My certificate says I was born on July 17th, 1998, exactly 28 years later. Claire felt a chill. It can't be a coincidence. With slightly trembling hands, she turned the dial of the safe, entering the combination. The mechanism yielded, with a satisfying click. Inside the safe were several meticulously organized folders, each labeled with names and dates. Claire took out the first one, marked as Nelson Adams Agreement, 1970. The document inside was a formal contract, signed by George Adams and Anthony Nelson. It stipulated the terms of an agreement that effectively separated the families, established property rights, and most significantly, determined that Elizabeth, Ellie, would be registered as an Adams, with the Nelsons financially contributing to her upbringing, provided the truth was never revealed. It was an agreement to hide my mother, Claire concluded bitterly, to protect the family's reputations. The next folder, labeled Adams Nelson Properties, contained deeds of land, stocks, and investments. Claire realized that several properties she believed belonged exclusively to the Adams were, in fact, secretly shared with the Nelsons. This explains why certain decisions about the family business always seemed strange, she commented. There were hidden interests involved. Luke examined the documents with growing concern. My father never mentioned any of this. He managed various businesses, but always said they were exclusively the Nelsons. Ryan found another folder, more recent, simply marked as RS Trust Fund. RS Ryan Sanders, he murmured, opening the folder with curiosity. Inside, he discovered documents establishing a substantial fund in his name, signed by Teresa Adams and Richard Nelson. The fund had been created when he was just a baby and had grown significantly over the years. They took care of you from a distance, observed Claire softly. They guaranteed your financial future without revealing your identity. The last folder, the thickest of all, was labeled with a simple, for Claire, Ryan, and Luke. Inside were 3 separate envelopes, each with their names, and a set of legal documents that, after a brief analysis, turned out to be a new agreement. Teresa had completely rewritten the original agreement between the families. The new terms abolished the contact restrictions, officially recognized Ryan as the son of Ellie and Richard, and redistributed the properties and assets equitably among all the legitimate heirs of the 2 families. She undid all the knots, murmured Claire, moved, corrected the mistakes of the past. Each opened their respective envelope. Claire's contained a personal letter from Teresa, reaffirming her love and expressing hope that Claire would find peace in knowing the whole truth. It also included documents officially transferring the house in Pine Grove to her name. Ryan's envelope contained a similar letter, formally introducing herself as his biological grandmother and explaining the circumstances of his birth and adoption. It also included photographs of Ellie pregnant with him and a small medallion with the initials EA, Ellie Adams. Luke's envelope, to everyone's surprise, contained a letter from his own father, Richard, written shortly before his passing. In it, Richard confessed his relationship with Ellie, revealed Ryan's existence, and asked his son's forgiveness for keeping so many secrets. My father knew this would happen, Luke murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. He prepared for this moment just like Teresa. Claire looked at the people around her, her newly discovered brother, her cousin and technically nephew, Luke, little Sophie, whose inexplicable abilities had catalyzed all these discoveries, and the faithful Judith, silent guardian of the family secrets for decades. "What do we do now?" asked Ryan, still trying to absorb all the revelations. Claire held the documents firmly in her lap. "I believe Teresa wanted us to honor her intention, to reunite the families, correct the mistakes of the past, and build something new together." Luke nodded slowly. "My father would have wanted the same. Beneath all the bitterness and secrets, he never stopped caring about Ellie, or about you, Ryan." Sophie, who was playing with the music box, looked at the adults with her innocent smile. "Grandma Teresa is happy now. Her mission is over." Claire felt tears in her eyes, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. There was a sense of conclusion, of pieces finally fitting together after decades of disorder. "Welcome to the family, Ryan," she said, extending her hand to her brother. "We have a lot to discover together." Ryan smiled, his eyes, so similar to hers, shining with contained emotion. "I always felt there was something more, some part of me that was missing. Now I understand why." Judith discreetly cleared her throat. "I've prepared the guest rooms. I think you all need to rest after so many emotions." When everyone had retired, Claire remained in the office for a few more moments, absorbing the presence of her grandfather and grandmother in that environment. Although George had participated in the agreement that separated the families, Teresa had dedicated her last years to preparing the way for reconciliation. "Thank you, Grandma," whispered Claire to the silence of the room, "for not letting the truth be lost forever." When she finally left the office, Claire realized that, for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel the oppressive weight of loneliness. She had not only found a brother and expanded her connection with Luke, but also a purpose: to honor Teresa's legacy by reuniting what had been separated for so long. In the hallway, Sophie waited patiently, holding a new drawing. This time it showed Claire, Ryan and Luke together in front of the house, with Teresa as an ethereal figure hovering over them, smiling. "Tomorrow, the hardest part begins," said the girl with a wisdom that transcended her age. "When the stones are removed, the water flows stronger." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. Morning arrived with the characteristic mist of pine grove, enveloping the house in an opalescent mantle that filtered the sunlight, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Claire awoke early, after a night of restless sleep, filled with fragmented dreams where Teresa appeared, always smiling, always indicating paths that dissolved before she could follow them. The reality of the previous day's discoveries still weighed on her, mingling with a strange feeling of relief. For years she had felt that something fundamental was missing in her understanding of the world, as if she were walking through a labyrinth where half the signposts had been deliberately removed. Maneuvering her chair down the silent hallway, Claire found Ryan already awake, observing the family photographs that adorned the walls. He turned upon hearing her, his face revealing that he too had spent a restless night processing revelations. "Good morning," he said softly. "Strange, isn't it? I spent my entire life not knowing I had a sister, and now I'm here looking at photos of a family that's mine, but that I never knew." Claire approached, observing the photograph that had captured Ryan's attention, an image of Ellie holding baby Claire in her arms, her radiant smile masking the secrets she carried. "She was extraordinary," commented Claire, "always smiling, always strong, even when I now know she carried so many burdens." "I look like her," Ryan observed. "I see traces of her in my face that I never recognized before." "And I inherited our grandfather's eyes," Claire smiled slightly. "Genetics is fascinating, separated by decades, and yet we share so many traits." The smell of fresh coffee and homemade bread reached them, indicating that Judith was already active in the kitchen. When they arrived there, they found not only the housekeeper but also Luke and Sophie, the latter quietly drawing while nibbling on a slice of cornbread. "Good morning," Luke greeted, looking almost as tired as they were. Sophie woke up before sunrise, insisting we all needed to be together for breakfast. The girl looked up from her drawing. "Today is important. Grandma Teresa said you need to go to the bank before noon." Claire and Ryan exchanged perplexed looks. "To the bank?" asked Claire. "Why?" Sophie shrugged, returning to her drawing. "There's a box waiting with important documents." Judith, who was placing a basket of bread on the table, abruptly stopped. "The safe deposit box," she murmured. "Ms. Teresa kept a safe deposit box at Meridian Bank. And you have the key?" asked Luke. The housekeeper shook her head. "No, but she always said that when the time came, the key would appear along with the right person." Claire thought about the events of the last few days, the key in the dress hem, the secret compartment in the library, the safe in the office. Teresa had meticulously planned each detail, creating a trail of discoveries that could only be followed when all the pieces and people were in the right place. "Ryan," she said suddenly, "check the medallion you found in the envelope." With an intrigued expression, Ryan took the small silver medallion from his pocket, where he had kept it the night before. Examining it more carefully in the morning light, he discovered that it wasn't just an ornament. The back opened, revealing a small golden key. "How did you know?" he asked, amazed. Claire smiled. "Teresa never left anything to chance. Every detail had a purpose." After breakfast, the four headed to Meridian Bank in downtown Pine Grove. The old building, with its Bavarian-style facade and heavy carved wooden doors, emanated an aura of solidity and tradition. Inside, they were greeted by the manager, a middle-aged man named August Miller, who seemed surprised to see Claire. "Miss Adams, what an extraordinary coincidence," he commented, adjusting his glasses. "I just received instructions to contact you today." "Instructions from whom?" asked Claire. "From the central office. Apparently, an automated protocol was activated this morning related to Ms. Teresa Adams's safe deposit box." He consulted a paper on his desk. "The specific instructions are to allow access to box 1707 only if you are accompanied by a Ryan Sanders and a Luke Nelson." The three exchanged impressed looks, while Sophie smiled as if she knew exactly what was happening. "How is this possible?" murmured Luke. "Teresa died 3 years ago." "Ms. Teresa was an extremely meticulous client," explained the manager. "She established various conditional and timed protocols. Some contracts were prepared decades ago, with explicit instructions about when and how they should be executed. August led them to the safe deposit box area, a discreet environment in the bank's basement, with walls lined with dark wood and soft lighting. Box 1707, again Ellie's birth date, was located in a section reserved for preferred clients. Ryan inserted the small golden key, which turned smoothly in the lock. Inside the box, they found a box of carefully organized documents, along with some personal objects and a sealed envelope addressed to the three of them. August discreetly left them alone in a private room so they could examine the contents. Claire opened the envelope, removing a letter written in Teresa's unmistakable handwriting. "My dear Claire, Ryan, and Luke, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found each other and discovered the truth that has remained hidden for so long. The contents of this safe deposit box represent the result of decades of planning. When I realized I would not be physically present to guide you through this journey, I began to prepare the way for the truth to emerge naturally at the appropriate time. The documents included here formalize what you have already discovered. Ryan is the son of Ellie and Richard, born of a complex love forbidden by circumstances. The properties shared between the Adams and Nelson families are now reorganized, with fair and transparent divisions for all legitimate heirs. The hostility between our families caused so much unnecessary suffering. Anthony Nelson and George Adams, cousins who grew up as brothers, allowed a dispute over inherited lands to transform them into bitter enemies. Their children, my Antonia and Richard, paid the highest price for this rivalry, being forced to live apart, even when the love between them persisted. Claire, my dear granddaughter, I know the accident that put you in that chair seems to have ended many of your dreams, but I deeply believe that your journey is just beginning. The fund I established for your rehabilitation will allow access to the best available treatments. Ryan, you grew up away from your roots, but you were never really alone. I followed your trajectory from a distance, respecting the agreement with your adoptive parents who raised you with so much love. The portion of the family inheritance that is yours is not just a birthright, but a means for you to build bridges between your past and your future. Luke, grandson of my heart, your father Richard carried the weight of many secrets, but he never stopped loving your mother Margaret. The mistakes he made were born of impossible circumstances and bonds that could never be completely broken. Forgive him, as I learned to forgive George and Anthony for their stubbornness that cost us all so much. Together, the three of you represent the possibility of healing that our family has needed for generations. The little messenger who certainly helped you get here, for I called her in my dreams, is just the catalyst for a reconciliation that now depends entirely on you. With all my love and hope, Teresa Adams. When Claire finished reading, silent tears were streaming down everyone's faces. The clarity with which Teresa had foreseen and orchestrated every aspect of this reunion was simultaneously frightening and comforting. Among the documents they found certificates, revised deeds, bank records, and surprisingly, detailed information about a rehabilitation center in Switzerland specializing in advanced treatments for spinal cord injuries like Claire's. "She really thought of everything," murmured Luke, examining the papers. "Even possibilities for your recovery, Claire." Ryan was holding a photo album that discreetly documented moments of his life: high school graduation, swimming competitions, his first handcrafted boat. Teresa had found ways to follow his development from a distance, respecting the agreement with the Sanders, but maintaining a silent connection with the grandson she could never embrace. "How did she manage all this?" asked Ryan, amazed and moved. "Teresa always said that true love is patient and persistent," replied Claire, leafing through other documents. "She waited decades for this moment to arrive." Sophie, who had remained surprisingly quiet, suddenly spoke. "Grandma Teresa says you need to go to the lake now. Everyone looked at the girl who was calmly playing with a pen, apparently oblivious to the impact of her words. "Sophie," Luke said gently, "are you having another daydream?" The girl shook her head. "It's not a dream. Grandma Teresa is here with us. She always has been." A reverent silence fell over the group. There was something in Sophie's tranquil certainty that made it impossible to dismiss her words as simple, childish imagination. "What lake, Sophie?" asked Claire softly. "The Willow Lake, where everything began, and where everything can begin again." Ryan and Luke exchanged confused looks, but Claire felt her heart accelerate. "Black Lake," she whispered. "On the family property, there's a small lake surrounded by willows. It was Grandma Teresa's favorite place." After storing the documents and formalizing access to the safe deposit box with the manager, they headed to the Adams rural property, situated about 20 minutes from downtown Pine Grove. The road wound through hills covered with pine trees, occasionally revealing glimpses of the valley below, where the mist began to dissipate under the midday sun. Claire hadn't visited Black Lake since before the accident. The rural property, with its green fields and the wooden summer house, had been a refuge during her childhood, but the uneven and isolated terrain had become inaccessible in her wheelchair. When they arrived, Judith was already waiting for them at the main house, as if she knew exactly when they would appear. "I prepared the path to the lake," she informed, indicating a newly created trail flat and wide enough for Claire's chair. "Miss Teresa had it built years ago, but it was never used." "What do you mean, had it built? Why did you never tell me about this?" asked Claire, surprised. "She said it should only be revealed when all of you were together," replied the housekeeper simply. This day was always in her plans. The trail wound gently among century-old trees until they emerged in a clearing where Black Lake rested, its perfectly smooth surface reflecting the sky like a dark mirror. The surrounding willows, with their long hanging branches touching the water, created a sense of isolation and serenity. In the center of the shore, a simple structure had been erected. A small gazebo of light wood with low steps and a side ramp that allowed easy access for Claire's chair. "This is new too," she commented, approaching the structure. Sophie ran ahead, climbing the steps and pointing to a bronze plaque fixed at the entrance. On it were engraved the words, "For Claire, Ryan, and Luke, where the branches of our tree reconnect. With love, Teresa." The date, Luke noticed, pointing to the small numbers below the message. "It's from 3 months after her death." "How is this possible?" asked Ryan, perplexed. Claire smiled, tears shining in her eyes, as she maneuvered her chair up the ramp, joining Sophie in the gazebo. "Teresa never did anything without a plan. She knew exactly what would happen, even when she was no longer here to see it." From the gazebo, the view of the lake was perfect. The dark, calm water, the willows forming a natural curtain, the mountains in the background creating a scene worthy of a postcard. But what really captured everyone's attention was a small polished wooden box in the center of the circular bench. "Open it," said Sophie, pointing to the box. "It's the last gift." Claire picked up the object, surprisingly light in her hands. There was no lock, just a perfectly fitted lid. Upon opening it, she found 3 identical silver rings, each engraved with a name: Claire, Ryan, Luke. "The rings of promise," Sophie explained naturally, "to remember that you will always be connected, no matter where life takes you." Luke and Ryan joined Claire in the gazebo, each taking the ring with their name. When they put them on, Sophie smiled with satisfaction. "Now Grandma Teresa's mission is complete," she declared. "She can rest peacefully." As if responding to the girl's words, a gentle breeze stirred the branches of the willows, creating a whisper that almost seemed like a distant voice. For a moment they could all swear they felt a loving presence around them, like a gentle and protective embrace. "What happens now?" asked Ryan, looking at the lake thoughtfully. Claire held the hand of her newly discovered brother. "Now we build something new from the pieces of the past. Exactly as Teresa hoped." Luke joined them, forming a circle. "A new story, without the mistakes of previous generations." Sophie observed everything with a serene smile, as if contemplating a puzzle finally completed, after years of scattered pieces. "Grandma Teresa says that now the hardest part begins," the girl commented, playing with a flower she had found on the gazebo floor. "Living with the truth is more complicated than living with secrets." Claire looked at the lake, reflecting on Sophie's surprisingly wise words. The journey that had begun with an unexpected drawing in a café had revealed not only family secrets, but also possibilities she had never imagined: a brother, an extended family, even hope for new treatments for her condition. "I'm ready," she said firmly, both to herself and to Teresa's memory that seemed to hover around them. "We're all ready." 6 months had passed since the revelations at Black Lake. Winter had given way to spring, which in turn had yielded to summer, bringing to Pine Grove sunny days that contrasted with the constant fog of previous months. Teresa's house, once a repository of secrets, now pulsed with new energy. Claire observed the movement in the garden through the living room window. Ryan was installing a ramp at the side entrance, sweating under the December sun, while Luke assisted him, holding boards and occasionally offering suggestions about the angle of inclination. Sophie ran around them, delivering tools and asking endless questions about the construction process. A soft smile appeared on Claire's lips. Her life had transformed in ways she could never have predicted on that rainy afternoon in the cafe, when a girl with colorful braids offered her a mysterious drawing. "Tea time, Miss Claire," announced Judith, entering the room with a tray. The housekeeper seemed rejuvenated in recent months, as if the weight of keeping secrets for decades had finally been removed from her shoulders. "Thank you, Judith. Can you call the others? We need to discuss the trip details." As Judith left to gather the group, Claire mentally reviewed the documents spread on the coffee table. Plane tickets to Zurich, confirmation of reservations at the rehabilitation clinic, treatment schedules, all meticulously organized, following the plan that Teresa had outlined years before. "We finished the ramp," announced Ryan, entering the room with his face flushed from physical effort. At 28, he radiated a youthful energy that contrasted with his reflective nature. In recent months, he had moved to Pine Grove, dividing his time between his remote work as a naval engineer and the restoration of the family property. Luke and Sophie followed him, the latter proudly carrying a small toolbox. The girl, now almost 7, continued to be the catalyst that kept everyone connected, her unique perception of events around her constantly surprising the adults. "The ramp is perfect," commented Luke, gratefully accepting the cup of tea that Judith offered him. "We tested it with an empty chair, and the angle is exactly as recommended by the specialists." Claire smiled, deeply touched by the effort. Since the discoveries, Ryan and Luke had dedicated themselves to making all the family properties accessible for her, removing physical obstacles with the same determination with which Teresa had removed the emotional obstacles that had separated the family for decades. "Thank you," she said simply, but the look she exchanged with her brother and cousin contained volumes of unexpressed gratitude. "So," Ryan sat beside her, cleaning his hands with a towel, "the preparations for Zurich are complete." Claire nodded, indicating the documents. "All confirmed. We leave in 2 weeks. The initial program is 3 months, with the possibility of extension depending on the results." "I still think we should all go," commented Luke, running his fingers through his still sweat-damp hair. "Someone needs to take care of business here," Claire responded pragmatically. "Besides, you have Sophie to think about. You can't just take her out of school for 3 months. Luke looked at his daughter, who was now quietly drawing in a corner of the room. Since the discovery of the family secrets, the bond between Sophie and Claire had strengthened extraordinarily, as if they shared an understanding that transcended words. "She'll miss you," he murmured. "We all will. That's why we arranged the visits," Ryan intervened. "You in odd months, me in even ones. Claire will never be alone for more than 2 weeks." Claire observed the interaction between them, marveling at the naturalness with which they had formed a cohesive family unit, despite the short time together. Teresa would be proud, she thought. "Before the trip," she said, changing the subject, "we need to finalize the business restructuring. The lawyer sent the last documents this morning." The restructuring Claire referred to was an ambitious project to officially unify the businesses of the Adams and Nelson families, previously kept separate for decades of rivalry. The Nelsons' construction companies and the Adams real estate properties were being reorganized under a single holding company, with Claire, Ryan, and Luke as the main shareholders. "I reviewed the contracts," informed Luke, who, with his training in architecture, had naturally assumed the management of construction projects. "Everything seems in order. The new structure respects Teresa's original vision, but with adaptations that reflect our current situation." "And the Sanders?" asked Claire, referring to Ryan's adoptive parents. Have they confirmed for Sunday dinner? Ryan smiled, a smile that mixed joy and a shadow of melancholy. Yes, they're coming. They're adapting to the idea. My mother, Martha, still seems to fear that I'm distancing myself, but my father understands better. He always knew this day would come somehow. The relationship between Ryan and his adoptive parents had been one of the most delicate issues to manage in recent months. The Sanders, who had raised him with love and dedication for 27 years, initially reacted with apprehension to the discovery of his biological family, but gradually, helped by Claire's sensitivity and Luke's respectful approach, they began to accept the idea of an extended family, rather than a replacement. They are part of our family now, affirmed Claire with conviction. Teresa would have loved to meet them. She knew them in a way, commented Judith, who had remained silently in the corner of the room. She kept herself informed about them, making sure they were good people taking good care of young Ryan. A moment of reflective silence followed, broken only by the sound of Sophie's pencils sliding over paper. "What are you drawing, Sophie?" asked Claire, seeking to lighten the emotionally charged atmosphere. The girl looked up, her eyes shining with that peculiar wisdom that often disconcerted adults. "The New Year's party. When you return from Zurich, New Year's." Luke frowned. "But it's December. Claire will be in treatment in Switzerland during New Year's." Sophie shook her head with conviction. "Not this New Year's, the next one. When she comes back walking." A dense silence fell over the room. Sophie's premonitory declarations still surprised them, even after months of living with her extraordinary perception. Claire felt her heart accelerate. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about the experimental treatment in Switzerland, but no one had mentioned the concrete possibility of walking again. Hope existed, certainly, but always moderated by clinical realism. "May I see the drawing?" she asked gently. Sophie brought the paper, delivering it with a confident smile. In the colourful drawing, Claire was standing, supported by a decorated cane, but undeniably standing surrounded by Ryan, Luke, Sophie, and several other people, including the Sanders, in front of the house, illuminated for festivities. "It's beautiful, Sophie," Claire murmured, feeling a confused mixture of emotions: hope, apprehension, a pang of fear of allowing herself to believe too much. "Grandma Teresa says you need to believe," affirmed Sophie calmly, as if reading her thoughts. "She says the mind prepares the path for the body to follow." Luke exchanged a significant look with Claire. Sophie's declarations about Teresa had never ceased in recent months, and although they had initially attributed this to childish imagination, the consistent accuracy of her messages made it difficult to completely dismiss the possibility of something more transcendent. "I'll keep that in mind," promised Claire, carefully storing the drawing among her travel documents. Throughout the treatment, the afternoon progressed with practical discussions about the family business, the preparations for Claire's absence, and plans for Christmas, which would occur a few days before her departure for Switzerland. Ryan and Luke alternated between pragmatic suggestions and occasional jokes, establishing a comfortable rhythm that made Claire feel safe and supported. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows through the windows of the house, Judith announced that dinner was served. Sophie ran to wash her hands, while the adults headed to the dining room, where the table was set with the discreet elegance that had always characterized meals in Teresa's house. During dinner, Claire observed the people around her: her newly discovered brother, her cousin who was technically her nephew, little Sophie with her extraordinary perception, the faithful Judith who had kept the family secrets for decades. This was her family now, rebuilt from the fragments left by the tumultuous past. "I've been thinking," she said when dessert was served, "of transforming the Black Lake property into a rehabilitation center when I return from Switzerland." Everyone looked at her with interest. "A rehabilitation center?" repeated Ryan. Claire nodded, enthusiastic about the idea she had been cultivating for weeks. "Exactly. Pine Grove has the ideal climate. The environment is tranquil, and that property is large enough to accommodate modern facilities without destroying the natural beauty. We could offer treatments for people with injuries similar to mine, especially those who don't have the resources to seek alternatives abroad." "That's brilliant," Luke commented, visibly impressed. "We could use the construction company's experience to adapt the space, and I could develop a specialized architectural project. And I could manage the administrative part," added Ryan. "My experience with project management would be useful." Claire smiled, moved by the immediate support. It would be a way to honor Teresa's legacy. She prepared the way for my rehabilitation. We can extend that opportunity to others. Grandma Teresa is smiling now, declared Sophie, licking her dessert spoon. She says you've found your purpose. Judith, who was discreetly collecting the empty plates, wiped away a furtive tear. Ms. Teresa always said that the true purpose of wealth is to create opportunities for those who don't have them. After dinner, while Luke helped Sophie with her bath, and Ryan talked on the phone with the Sanders about the details of Sunday's meeting, Claire headed to Teresa's old room, now transformed into her personal office. The room maintained her grandmother's essence: the carefully organized books, personal objects precisely arranged on the shelves, the slight aroma of lavender that seemed impregnated in the walls themselves. But Claire had added her own touches: a modern computer on the antique desk, recent photographs of the reunited family, plans and projects organized in colorful folders. Approaching the window, she observed the garden bathed in the silvery light of the crescent moon. So many transformations in such a short time, not just the external circumstances, but her own perception of the world and her place in it. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered to the silence of the room, "for not giving up on us." In response, a gentle breeze stirred the curtains, bringing with it the intensified scent of lavender. Claire smiled, allowing herself to believe just for a moment that Teresa somehow heard her. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Ryan entered, carrying a wooden box that Claire immediately recognized: her mother Ellie's jewelry box. "I found this in the attic," he explained, placing the box on the table. "Judith mentioned it belonged to our mother. I thought we could explore it together." Claire felt a lump in her throat. "I haven't opened this box since the accident." Ryan pulled up a chair, sitting beside her. "We can do this together now, as it should have been from the beginning." With slightly trembling fingers, Claire opened the box. The familiar aroma of the perfume that Ellie used immediately escaped, triggering a wave of memories. Inside, carefully organized, were her mother's personal treasures: pearl earrings, delicate rings, silver bracelets. But there were also less obvious objects: laminated movie tickets, small shells collected from beaches, handwritten notes yellowed by time. "Look at this." Ryan picked up a small envelope hidden under a false compartment at the bottom of the box. Inside was a lock of dark hair tied with a blue ribbon and a note: "Ryan's first haircut, 7 months. My precious son, always in my heart even when distant from my arms." Claire held her brother's hand, feeling the emotional weight of the discovery. "She never forgot you, Ryan. She never stopped loving you." "I know," he replied softly. "Somehow I always knew there was someone thinking of me, even without knowing who." They continued exploring the contents of the box, each object revealing a new facet of Ellie: her passion for classical music, her love for poetry, her admiration for nature. And interwoven with these discoveries, subtle evidence of how she had kept Ryan in her thoughts, even when circumstances forced them to remain separated. "She would have loved to see us two together like this," commented Claire, when they finally closed the box hours later. "I think she is seeing," replied Ryan simply, "just like Teresa." The next morning, while they had coffee on the veranda that offered a panoramic view of the hills of Pine Grove, Luke formally presented the preliminary architectural plans for the rehabilitation center. He had been working on them secretly for the last few weeks, anticipating Claire's proposal. "The project maintains the natural aesthetics of the property," he explained, unrolling detailed plans on the table. "We've integrated the medical facilities into the landscape, using local materials and sustainable techniques." Claire examined the drawings, impressed with Luke's vision. The proposed rehabilitation center perfectly balanced functionality and beauty, with therapeutic spaces facing the lake, accessible trails winding among the willows, and a main structure that harmonized perfectly with the original house. "It's exactly as I imagined," she commented, moved. "Better, actually." "We can start the approval process immediately," suggested Ryan, "so that everything is underway when you return from Switzerland." "And I've already created a list of specialists we could hire," added Luke, handing Claire a folder with resumes and recommendations. "Doctors, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, all with specific experience in rehabilitation of spinal cord injuries." Claire looked at the two, feeling a wave of gratitude so intense it almost took her breath away. "You really believe in this, don't you? In this project, in the possibility of transformation. "We believe in you," replied Ryan simply. "The rest is a natural consequence." Sophie, who was playing in the garden, suddenly ran up to them, holding something in her hands. "Look what I found near the old oak." It was a small metal box, partially corroded by time and exposure to the elements. When they opened it, they found a set of old keys and a note written in Teresa's handwriting. "For when the circle is complete and new paths open." Claire picked up the keys, examining them with curiosity. "Another of Teresa's enigmas? I think I'll know what they're for when the time is right," commented Sophie naturally, returning to play as if she hadn't said anything extraordinary. Luke, Claire and Ryan exchanged significant looks. The journey that Teresa had initiated clearly wasn't complete. There were more layers to unravel, more discoveries to make, more connections to establish. But now, united as a family, they were ready to face any mystery that arose. The truth was no longer something to fear, but a path to follow together. As the sun rose in the Pine Grove sky, illuminating the Adams property with a golden clarity that seemed to herald new beginnings, Claire looked at her brother, her cousin, and the extraordinary Sophie, feeling a deep certainty that, regardless of what the future held, whether walking again as Sophie had predicted or continuing in her chair, she would no longer be alone. Teresa had fulfilled her most important promise, reuniting the scattered branches of the family tree, allowing new roots to form and a joint future stronger and truer to finally flourish.